Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. There's nothing quite like a pandemic to get you thinking about what if. So, what would happen to your business, your staff, business partners and loved ones if you were suddenly no longer around? From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. It's not something we like to dwell on, but it would help ease the stress and grief if your intentions are clearly understood, if you were to go. Melisa Sloan is a partner of Melisa Sloan Lawyers, and she's written a detailed, practical book about getting your estate in place were you to be incapacitated or something else. It's called Legacy, and it's about more than just leaving what you own, as she outlines in a moment. First, though, Melisa's a big advocate of documenting everything to eliminate as much confusion as possible for your loved ones and your business partners.
It's really important to have an updated list of assets and liabilities. It doesn't have to be elaborate. A simple spreadsheet will suffice. It is important to list those assets that you own personally, both individually and jointly, together with assets that you might control, for example, a family or discretionary trust. By having a list and a clearly defined inventory of assets and liabilities, you will save your executor an inordinate amount of time, and you'll also provide them with a comprehensive roadmap to assist them greatly in undertaking the role as the executor.
Well, a business is a significant asset for some. When it comes to estate planning, what are things to keep in mind when it comes to the business?
The first thing to identify the sector in which the business is held. So, for example, if your business is held as a sole proprietor business or a state trading company, then provision can be made in your will for what happens to the business subsequent to your demise. However, if the business operates in a discretionary trust, then it is the trust that owns the assets of the business, and you cannot make provision for the individual trust assets in your will. If, however, you are the appointer or the guardian of that trust, then depending on the provisions of the trust deed, you may be able to make provision for who will be the appointer or guardian upon your demise. If your business is operated as a partnership, or if you have a succession agreement or buy-sell agreement in place, then such agreements will stipulate what is to happen to your equity in the business and prospectively the assets of the business. So when you are putting your estate plan in place, it's a really ideal time to review these agreements to ensure that they are current and also to conceptualise how they tie in with your estate plan.
Well, family businesses, they can be a whole lot different, can't they, in estate planning? What do owners of family-run businesses need to consider?
It's important for family-run businesses to maintain the harmony between family members. For family members to try and be transparent in respect to what the future holds and how the family business will operate. And it's important that discussions to be held individually and collectively so that everyone can lay their expectations on the table. But what is really, really crucial with family businesses is that you really should involve your trusted advisors, such as accountants, financial planners, and estate planning lawyers in all estate planning discussions relating to the business. By involving your trusted advisors in your estate planning, you will then be able to ensure that all components of your succession planning are thoroughly considered and documented correctly. And your advisors will also be able to advise you, in addition to just the estate planning, but also the tax consequences and asset protection strategies that may be available to you.
One thing that a lot of us probably don't think about, and we should, is technology and passwords, for example. Passwords to different accounts and websites and social media and all those kinds of things. There's something we didn't have to worry about 20 or 30 years ago, but we do now. How do you suggest we handle all of that when we're gone?
Absolutely. A digital legacy is a relatively new concept. Nevertheless, it is an important one to consider. What sort of digital legacy you would like to leave behind? So in doing so, you should give consideration to your passwords, social media and email accounts and what is to happen to those when you pass away. So depending on the platform that you have or utilize, you may elect to memorize or delete your account. And you should really leave definitive instructions to your executor in respect to your wishes of what you would like to happen to those accounts. Likewise, passwords are of particular importance as they may hold key valuable information that your executor may need. So it's therefore imperative that your passwords are located in a secure place that your executor will be able to access subsequent to your death. Some people also put in place a digital asset register, and there are also some apps on the market that do allow for passwords to be securely secured.
Now, what about super, Melissa? What happens to that when you're gone? Or is that part of your will?
Very interesting question, and it's an area where a lot of people get very, very confused because people do think it is part of your will, but it's not. Your superannuation is actually held on trust by the trustee of your super fund, whether that's an industry or master fund or even a self-managed super fund. So what you do need to do is that you need to provide the trustee of your super fund with a direction in respect to where you would like your superannuation to be paid at the time of your death. And this essentially is done by providing the trustee with a binding death nomination or a non-lapsing nomination.
And what happens if you don't have a nomination in place?
Another great question because a lot of people just don't have that nomination in place at all. So if you don't have that nomination in place, it's up to the trustee of your superannuation fund as to where that superannuation is paid. Their decision will be guided by the governing rules of the fund, and in most cases, those governing rules will stipulate that the superannuation must be paid to a dependent, which is a spouse, a partner, a de facto, a child under the age of 25 who is financially dependent, or a disabled child. However, if there's no dependent, then it would normally be paid to your estate and dealt with in accordance with the provisions of your will.
And what about insurance, Melissa? What kind of insurance needs to be taken into account with an estate plan?
Yeah. Life insurance can be a very powerful tool in taking care of families and loved ones left behind. And as such, insurance is an aspect that is increasingly becoming a value when putting an estate plan in place. Permanent disability insurance is important. It's important to realistically sit back and ask yourself, if something happened to you and you became disabled, will you have the adequate funds for your care and living expenses, and also to provide for your family if need be? Will your outstanding liabilities, such as home loans, be able to be serviced or paid out? In addition, life insurance is also of significance important. One motivating factor that people put life insurance in place is to cover their children's future education costs, mortgages, debt, and living expenses. So when looking at these liabilities and expenses, it's ideal to look at them from a perspective that if you were not here tomorrow, how much insurance would you need to cover these debts and other costs? At the very least, a review of your current insurances will reinforce that what you have currently in place, and it could also be the catalyst for determining whether the level of insurance that you have is sufficient or whether additional insurance is required.
Well, that's a lot to think about with estate planning, of course, and it's probably something everyone always has to think about. Now, before we go, Melissa, you've called your book Legacy. Why is that? And what is a legacy exactly?
I called my book Legacy to encourage people to think about their own legacy and the legacy that they would like to leave behind. Quite often we are running 100 miles an hour and we don't stop to think of that very, very simple question. Legacy means different things to many people. To some, it's about having buildings, stadiums, or monuments named after them. For others, it means working hard to create something of significance to leave behind, whether that's a business or financial support for future generations. Some people like to document their life story for future generations, whether that be in a book, a video, or audio book. But I personally think taking care of your family when you are no longer here is one of the most beautiful legacies that you can leave.
That was Principal at Melisa Sloan Lawyers, Melisa Sloan. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.